Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ted Kinney's meticulously maintained backyard. He stood on his wraparound deck, hands gripping the polished mahogany railing, watching a small army of caterers transform the space into an elegant venue. White-clothed tables dotted the lawn like oversized mushrooms, while strings of crystal lights were being hung between the mature oak trees that bordered his property. "Table 4 needs to be 3 feet to the left," Ted called out, gesturing to a pair of caterers struggling with a particularly heavy table. "We need clear paths between all the seating areas." At 52, Ted carried himself with the confidence of a self-made man. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his custom-tailored suit fit his athletic frame perfectly. He unconsciously adjusted the new Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, Madeline's latest gift. The timepiece probably cost more than his first construction truck, but that was the kind of life they lived now. Still micromanaging every detail, "I see." A familiar voice called from behind him. Ted turned to see Carol Lancaster, his best friend and business partner of 15 years, approaching with 2 crystal tumblers of scotch. Carol's tie was already slightly loosened, his jacket draped over one arm, a stark contrast to Ted's impeccable appearance. "Someone has to make sure it's done right." Ted accepted the offered drink, taking a small sip. "Macallan 25? Only the best for your 20th, Carol replied, leaning against the railing. "Quite the turnout expected tonight?" Madeline insisted, Ted said, watching another catering van pull into the circular driveway. "Seems half of Boston's elite will be here." The guest list reads like a who's who of New England society. Carol shifted uncomfortably, his expression turning serious. "Ted, there's something you should know about that European investor who's been hanging around the office lately. I've been doing some digging and—" "Darling." Madeline's voice rang out from the French doors leading to the house. She glided onto the deck, a vision in a champagne-colored Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 48, she still turned heads, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. Behind her strode a tall, distinguished-looking man with olive skin and salt and pepper hair. His Italian suit screamed old money, and his smile carried the confident charm of European aristocracy. "Phil arrived early," Madeline announced, touching Ted's arm with perfectly manicured fingers. "You remember Phil Melendez, the art dealer from Barcelona? He's been so helpful with furnishing the new office building." Phil stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ted, wonderful to see you again. The property is looking magnificent." His accent was subtle but unmistakable, adding an air of sophistication to his words. Ted shook the offered hand, noting how familiar Phil seemed with his surroundings. "Glad you could make it, Phil. I trust your flight was comfortable?" "But of course. Your lovely wife arranged everything perfectly." Phil's eyes lingered on Madeline for a fraction too long. "She has impeccable taste." Before Ted could respond, excited voices called from the lawn. Uncle Phil, Lance and Jeannie, the twins, bounded up the deck stairs. At 16, they were the perfect blend of their parents, or so Ted had always thought. Lance had his father's build and his mother's fair coloring, while Jeannie was a younger version of Madeline with what Ted had assumed was his own dark eyes. "Ah, Ms. Niños." Phil's face lit up as he embraced the teenagers. "You've grown so much since Christmas." Ted frowned slightly. Had Phil been at their Christmas celebration? He couldn't recall, but then again, he'd been busy with the Morrison project deadline. "Did you bring us anything from Barcelona?" Jeannie asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Phil laughed, reaching into his jacket. "Would I ever forget?" He produced 2 small wrapped packages. "But these are for later, yes?" Carol cleared his throat. "Ted, about what I was saying." "Darling," Madeline interrupted smoothly, "the band needs to know where to set up. Would you mind?" Ted nodded, downing the last of his scotch. As he walked away, he could hear Phil asking the twins about their studies, speaking with the familiarity of a close relative rather than a casual business acquaintance. The next hour passed in a blur of logistics and greetings as guests began to arrive. Ted found himself playing the role of gracious host, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, and making small talk about business and politics. Yet he couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. From across the rapidly filling backyard, he caught sight of Kimberly Orr, his secretary of 12 years. She was standing near the bar, her expression troubled as she watched him. She'd been trying to speak with him privately for weeks now, but something always seemed to come up. Usually Madeline needing his attention for some urgent matter. "Mr. Kinney?" Kimberly started making her way toward him, but Madeline suddenly appeared at his side. "Ted, the Hendersons just arrived. You must come say hello. Richard is considering investing in that new development project." As his wife led him away, Ted glanced back to see Kimberly's shoulders slump in resignation. The party was in full swing as the sun began to set. Hundreds of tiny lights twinkled in the trees, casting a warm glow over the gathering. A jazz quartet played sophisticated background music while waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Ted stood near the bar, observing the scene with a businessman's eye for detail. The catering was impeccable, the music perfectly pitched to enable conversation, the lighting creating an intimate atmosphere despite the large crowd. Everything was perfect, almost too perfect. His gaze drifted to where Phil Melendez held court near the pool, surrounded by admiring guests. The art dealer was regaling them with what appeared to be an amusing story, his hands gesturing expressively. Madeline stood at his elbow, laughing at all the right moments, her hand occasionally brushing his arm. "They seem quite comfortable together," Carol murmured, appearing at Ted's side with fresh drinks. Ted accepted the scotch without taking his eyes off the scene. "Phil's been around a lot this past year. Potential investments in the company, art consulting for the new buildings, cultural advice for our European expansion." "About that," Carol began, lowering his voice. "I've been looking into his background, and something doesn't add up. His investment firm—" "Dad." Lance's voice cut through their conversation as he approached with a group of his friends. "Uncle Phil was just telling us about his villa in Barcelona. He says we should come stay for the summer." Ted's brow furrowed. "Uncle Phil?" Lance's expression flickered for a moment before he recovered. "Oh, that's just what we call him. He's around so much. It just feels natural." "How long has he been around so much?" Ted asked carefully. "Oh, Lance shifted uncomfortably. "Hey, is it okay if we use the pool house to change? Some of us want to swim." Before Ted could respond, Phil appeared behind Lance, resting a familiar hand on the boy's shoulder. "Perhaps swimming isn't the best idea, Mijo. The night air is getting chilly, and we wouldn't want you catching cold before your big tennis match tomorrow." Ted stared at Phil. How did he know about Lance's tennis schedule? "Uncle Phil's right." Lance agreed easily. "Come on, guys, let's grab some food instead." As the teenagers moved away, Phil gave Ted a practice smile. "Wonderful boys you have, Ted. They remind me so much of myself at that age. The same spirit, the same fire in their eyes." Ted forced himself to return the smile, even as something cold settled in his stomach. "They're good kids. Take after their mother mostly." "Ah, yes." Phil's eyes drifted to where Madeline was chatting with some guests. "Madeline is exceptional. You're a lucky man, Ted." Before Ted could respond, Kimberly approached again, clutching her phone. "Mr. Kinney, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something urgent I need to discuss." "Ted." Madeline's voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "The Blakelines want to discuss that charity gala they're planning. Come, darling, you simply must hear their ideas." As Ted was led away once again, he noticed Phil and Kimberly exchange a look, his smugly confident, hers filled with frustrated concern. The night wore on, and Ted found himself watching his family with new eyes. He noticed how Jeannie gravitated toward Phil, showing him her recent school photos on her phone. The art dealer's comments suggested an intimate knowledge of her life, her horseback riding lessons, her struggles with calculus, her dreams of studying in Europe. "Photo time," Madeline called out, gathering the family near the garden trellis. "Phil, dear, would you mind taking it?" "Actually," one of the guests offered, "I can take it so Phil can be in the photo too." Ted watched as his family arranged themselves, with Phil somehow ending up between the twins, his arms around their shoulders as naturally as if he belonged there. The flash went off, capturing a moment that felt increasingly surreal. "Oh, that's lovely," Madeline gushed, reviewing the photo. "Phil, you must send this to Isabel. She'll love seeing how much the twins have grown." "Isabel?" Ted asked. "My sister in Barcelona," Phil explained smoothly. "She's quite fond of your family." Ted's mind raced. When had his family met Phil's sister? How had he missed these connections forming right under his nose? From across the garden, he caught sight of Carol deep in conversation with Kimberly, both of them throwing concerned glances his way. Whatever they were trying to tell him, he had a sinking feeling it was too late. As the party began to wind down, Ted found himself seeking solitude in his garden. The space had been Madeline's project when they first bought the house, but she'd lost interest once it was completed, leaving the maintenance to their gardeners. Now, it served as a quiet retreat from the dwindling celebration. He walked along the winding path, past carefully tended roses and ornamental shrubs, until he reached the Victorian-style trellis arch covered in climbing vines. The structure marked the entrance to a small meditation area, complete with a stone bench and a quietly burbling fountain. Voices drifted from the other side of the trellis, partially obscured by the sound of water. Ted recognized his children's voices and started to step forward to greet them, but something in their tone made him pause. "Dad's so stupid and dumb." Lance's voice carried clearly through the evening air, followed by a laugh that made Ted's blood run cold. It wasn't the typical teenage dismissal of a parent. There was real contempt in his son's voice. "I know, right?" Jeannie joined in. "He doesn't know you're our real father." Ted's hand gripped the trellis, his knuckles turning white. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as a third voice joined the conversation. Now, Ms. Niños." Phil's accent was thicker in this unguarded moment. "We must be patient. Everything is arranged." "But it's been forever," Jeannie whined. "Mom says once the inheritance comes through, we'll all move to your house in Europe. She's already packed most of her jewelry." "Your mother is enthusiastic," Phil chuckled. "But these things take time. The accounts must be properly prepared. The paperwork must be perfect. One small mistake could ruin everything." "I don't see why we have to wait," Lance grumbled. "It's not like he suspects anything. He's too busy with his precious company to notice what's happening in his own house." "That's exactly why we must be careful." Phil's voice took on a warning tone. "You're Ted. He may be blind to his personal life, but he's no fool when it comes to business. One wrong move could cost us everything." "Mom says he signed those new contracts last week," Jeannie offered. "The ones about the European expansion?" "Yes, and those will prove very useful," Phil replied. "But there are still details to arrange. The offshore accounts need time to mature. The property transfers must appear natural." "What about the company?" Lance asked. "Mom said something about a takeover?" "Leave that to the adults, Mijo. Roger Clements is handling that part of the arrangement. Soon enough, everything will belong to us, as it should have from the beginning." Ted stood frozen behind the trellis, his mind racing to process what he was hearing. 17 years of marriage, 16 years of fatherhood, all built on a foundation of lies. Every business deal, every family dinner, every moment of what he'd thought was happiness. It had all been part of an elaborate deception. "I still can't believe he bought that story about the art dealership," Lance snickered. "As if anyone would pay those prices for those ugly modern pieces." "Your father," Phil caught himself, "Ted, sees what he expects to see. It's a common weakness in men who build themselves up from nothing. They become so focused on proving themselves that they miss what's right in front of them. Like Mom's business trips to Barcelona?" Jeannie giggled. "Or all those art consultation meetings at the hotel downtown," Lance added. Phil's voice turned sharp. "Enough. Your mother and I have protected you from the uglier aspects of this situation, but never forget what's at stake. One careless word, one misplaced comment, and everything we've worked for could disappear." "Sorry, Papa," the twins chorused, the words striking Ted like a physical blow. "Now, go back to the party," Phil instructed. "Your mother will be looking for you. Remember, just a few more months, and we'll never have to pretend again." Ted heard footsteps on the garden path as his children, no, Phil's children, walked away, still giggling about their deception. He remained hidden until Phil's footsteps followed, moving in the opposite direction. When he was finally alone, Ted sank onto the stone bench, his legs no longer able to support him. The fountain bubbled cheerfully beside him, its sound now seeming to mock the destruction of his world. Everything made sense now. The interrupted conversations with Carol and Kimberly, Madeline's sudden interest in the European expansion projects, the twins' increasing distance from him. All the pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of betrayal so complete it took his breath away. He pulled out his phone, looking at the family photo from earlier that evening. They were all smiling at the camera, a perfect family portrait. But now he could see what he'd been missing. The way Madeline leaned slightly toward Phil, the natural way the twins fit under his arms, the subtle signs of conspiracy in their expressions. A message notification popped up on his screen, Kimberly trying one last time to warn him. Below it was an email from Roger Clements, his supposed colleague, probably containing another piece of the trap they were laying for him. Ted stood slowly, slipping his phone back into his pocket. The garden path stretched before him, leading back to the party where his wife, his children, and the man who had stolen them continued to play their roles in this elaborate charade. The quiet rage building inside him was tempered by years of business experience. He'd built his empire from nothing once before. He could do it again, but this time, he'd make sure those who betrayed him lost everything in the process. As he emerged from the garden, Ted's face showed nothing of his inner turmoil. He joined a group of guests, laughing at their jokes and discussing business prospects as if his entire world hadn't just crumbled around him. After all, he had learned something valuable tonight. Sometimes the perfect lie wasn't the one you told others, but the one you told yourself. Across the yard, he caught Carol's eye and gave a slight nod. Whatever his friend and Kimberly had been trying to tell him, he already knew the worst of it. Now it was time to plan his countermove, and Ted Kinney hadn't become successful by playing defense. The party continued around him, crystal glasses clinking, music playing, and conversations flowing. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath the perfect facade, the first cracks had appeared, and Ted knew that when the breaking finally came, it would shatter everything in its path. The morning after his 20th wedding anniversary party, Ted Kinney sat in his home office, staring at the family portrait on his desk. The first rays of sunrise filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. He hadn't slept. How could he, after what he'd discovered? The sound of Madeline's soft breathing drifted from their bedroom down the hall. She had no idea he'd spent the night reviewing old photos, financial statements, and correspondence, seeing them all with new eyes. His phone buzzed. Carol. "I'm coming over," his friend said without preamble. "And I'm bringing someone you need to meet." 30 minutes later, Carol arrived with a man who looked more like an accountant than a private investigator. Average height, average build, unremarkable features. The kind of person your eyes would slide right past in a crowd. "Ted Kinney, meet Darren Brown." Carol made the introduction in Ted's study. "He's the best in the business at uncovering things people want to keep hidden." Darren set his briefcase on Ted's desk. "Mr. Lancaster has filled me in on the situation. Before we proceed, I need to know. Are you absolutely certain you want to know everything? Some truths can't be unknown once they're revealed." Ted's laugh was hollow. "I heard my children call another man Papa last night. I think we're past the point of protecting my feelings." "Fair enough." Darren opened his briefcase. "I've already done preliminary research based on Mr. Lancaster's concerns. Your wife's travel patterns over the past 17 years show regular trips to Barcelona, often coinciding with school holidays or business conferences you couldn't attend." 17 years, Ted muttered. "The twins are 16. "Yes," Darren nodded. "And there's more. Your children's last physical examination included routine blood work. With the right access, those samples could be repurposed for DNA testing." Carol leaned forward. "Is that legal?" "Let's say it falls into a gray area," Darren replied. "The question is, do you want to know?" Ted stood, walking to his window. Below, he could see the remains of last night's party being cleared away. A catering truck was pulling out of the driveway, and gardeners were collecting the strings of lights from the trees. Do it, he said without turning around. I want proof of everything, the affairs, the business dealings, all of it. Leave no stone unturned. It will take time, Darren cautioned, and it won't be cheap. Money is no object. Ted finally turned back to face them. But time might be. Based on what I overheard last night, they're planning something big. I'll need access to your home and office computers, Darren said, pulling out a small device. This will mirror their hard drives without leaving a trace. And I'll need your authorization to place surveillance. A knock at the study door interrupted him. Ted quickly signaled Darren to pack away his equipment. Come in, he called, keeping his voice casual. Madeline entered, still in her silk robe, looking fresh despite the early hour. Darling, I thought I heard voices. Carol, what brings you here so early? And who's this? Dave Brown, Darren answered smoothly, extending his hand. I'm with the Contractors Association. We were just discussing the new European development project. Of course, Madeline's smile was perfect, practiced. Would anyone like coffee? I can have Rosa bring some up. No need, Carol stood. We were just leaving. Ted, we'll continue this discussion at the office. After they left, Madeline wrapped her arms around Ted from behind. You worked so hard on the party, darling. You should have slept in. Ted forced himself to return her embrace, remembering the jewelry she'd already packed, the plans she'd already made. You know me. Always working. Speaking of work, she pulled back slightly. Phil mentioned he might stop by the office today. Something about those investment papers? Did he? Ted kept his voice neutral. I'll make sure Kimberly knows to expect him. Oh, don't bother Kimberly with it. I can handle all the arrangements. Of course you can, Ted thought. The next few weeks passed in a blur of secret meetings and revelations. Darren's reports arrived daily, each one worse than the last. Email exchanges between Madeline and Phil spanning nearly 2 decades. Offshore account transfers disguised as art purchases. Meeting records with Roger Clements, Ted's biggest competitor, outlining plans for a hostile takeover. The DNA results arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ted stared at the numbers and charts that proved what he'd already known in his heart. The twins were not his children. He was reviewing the latest batch of documents in his office when Kimberly finally managed to corner him alone. She closed the door behind her, her usual professional demeanor cracking with urgency. Mr. Kinney, I've been trying to tell you. Mrs. Kinney has been copying company documents. She's been meeting with Roger Clements from our rival firm. Ted looked up at his loyal secretary. How many times had she tried to warn him? How many signals had he missed? I know, Kimberly. He smiled grimly. And I know about the planned hostile takeover too. Kimberly sank into the chair across from his desk. How long have you known? Since the anniversary party. Ted passed her one of Darren's reports. They're planning to strip the company assets, transfer everything to offshore accounts, and leave me with nothing but debt and federal investigations. Those bastards, Kimberly whispered, scanning the documents. What are you going to do? What I do best, Ted replied. Build something new from the ground up. But first, I'm going to need your help. The law office of Jerry Shannon and Associates occupied the entire top floor of a downtown Boston high-rise. Ted sat in the conference room with Jerry Shannon and Carrie Douglas, his financial advisor, surrounded by stacks of documents and empty coffee cups. They'd been working through the night, methodically dismantling and rebuilding Ted's empire. The company shares will be transferred to a new holding corporation, Jerry explained, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. Your personal assets will be moved to unreachable trusts. They won't get a dime. Carrie nodded, pulling up complex spreadsheets on her tablet. I've arranged for the sale of your European properties. They'll close the day you leave. The timing has to be perfect. We can't tip our hand too early. What about the twins' trust funds? Ted asked, his voice tight. Already dissolved, Carrie replied softly. The money has been transferred to educational trusts for your employees' children. Legally, it's untouchable. Ted stood, walking to the window. Below, Boston's financial district was coming to life. Early morning workers hurrying through the streets like ants. Ted, Jerry's voice was gentle. Are you sure about this? These moves, they're permanent. Once we set this in motion, there's no going back. They made their choice 17 years ago, Ted replied without turning around. Now I'm making mine. There's something else you should see, Carrie said, pulling out another file. We've been tracking Phil Melendez's art dealings. They're not just a cover for his relationship with Madeline. They're part of an international money laundering operation. If this gets out— When? Ted corrected her. When this gets out. But not yet. First, we need to make sure everything's in place. The next few weeks required Oscar-worthy performances from Ted. He maintained his routine perfectly, playing the role of oblivious husband and businessman. He attended charity functions with Madeline, discussed summer plans with the twins, and reviewed investment proposals with Phil. Late at night, while Madeline slept, he photographed documents from her private files and copied the contents of her laptop. During business hours, he worked closely with Kimberly to document every suspicious transaction, every unauthorized document copy, every secret meeting. Mrs. Kinney called again. Kimberly reported one afternoon. She wants to know if you've reviewed the new contract from Roger Clement's firm. Ted smiled, thinking of the fake contracts Darren had helped him prepare. Tell her I'll look at it tonight. Oh, and Kimberly? Thank you for everything. Just promise me one thing, Mr. Kinney, she replied. When this all comes down, make sure they get what they deserve. Oh, they will, Ted assured her. They definitely will. The final piece of Ted's plan came together over dinner at an exclusive restaurant in downtown Boston. Isabel Castillo, a legitimate developer from Madrid, sat across from him, reviewing the contracts for what would become the biggest deal of his career. At least, that's what Madeline would be led to believe. Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Kinney, Isabel said in perfect English. Though I must admit, your terms are unusually generous. Call it an investment in the future, Ted replied, signing the contracts with a flourish. And please call me Ted. Later that evening, he presented the deal to Madeline over dinner in their formal dining room. The twins were out with friends, or with Phil, he suspected, leaving them alone in the massive house. It's a 2-year commitment minimum, he explained, watching her reaction carefully. But the profits will set us up for life. Madeline's eyes lit up exactly as he'd expected. The twins could attend school in Europe. I'll start looking at houses. Actually, Ted interrupted, taking a sip of wine to hide his expression, I think you should stay here, manage things. Phil can help with any art acquisitions for the new properties, but surely the children need to finish their education here, Ted said firmly. Besides, someone needs to oversee the company's domestic operations. Who better than you? He watched the calculations play out behind her eyes. 2 years of freedom to operate without his interference. 2 years to complete whatever scheme she and Phil had concocted. Of course, darling, she finally replied, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. You're absolutely right. The children's education should come first. Ted squeezed back, thinking of the documents waiting in Carol's safe. I knew you'd understand. After all, family is everything, isn't it? That night, as Madeline slept beside him, Ted sent a series of encrypted messages from a burner phone. The pieces were all in place, Darren's evidence compiled and verified, Carrie's financial transfers arranged, Jerry's legal documents prepared, and Isabel's role in the deception secured. Soon, very soon, the perfect lie they'd built would come crashing down. But first, Ted had one more role to play. The trusting husband, going off to build a better future for his family. The irony almost made him laugh. Ted sat in Dawn Harper's nondescript office in a quiet suburb of Boston, watching the former intelligence operative type rapidly on multiple screens. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, building his new life piece by digital piece. Your cryptocurrency accounts are set up, Dawn said, not looking away from her monitors. I've distributed the funds across multiple wallets using different blockchain networks. Even if they somehow trace one, they'll never find them all. And the identities? Ted asked, examining the passports spread before him. Each bore his photo but with subtle differences, different haircuts, different glasses, different names. Michael Chen, Canadian businessman. James Foster, British consultant. Robert Nash, Australian investor. Dawn pointed to each passport in turn. Each identity has a complete digital footprint going back 15 years. Tax records, credit history, social media presence, everything needed to withstand scrutiny. Darren Brown, who had recommended Dawn's services, stood by the window keeping watch. The documents you requested are ready too. Full dossiers on Phil's art fraud operation, Madeline's involvement, the planned hostile takeover, everything. Ted picked up one of the passports, feeling its weight. How long before they realized they're fake? Dawn's laugh was sharp. Mr. Kinney, these aren't fake. They're real passports, issued by real governments, backed by real documentation. The only fake thing is the name attached to them. A knock at the door made them all tense, but it was just Carol arriving for the final briefing. Ted's friend and business partner looked exhausted. The past few weeks of preparation had taken their toll on everyone. Ted handed him a USB drive. This contains everything, proof of their affairs, the embezzlement attempts, Phil's criminal record in Europe. Release it to the authorities in exactly 1 month. Carol turned the small device over in his hands, his expression grim. The company shares? Already transferred to the employee's trust. You're the new CEO. Ted smiled at his friend's surprised look. Who better to lead them? You helped build this company as much as I did. The timing has to be perfect. Dawn interrupted, still focused on her screens. The property sales, the account transfers, the document releases. Everything has to happen in the right sequence. Walk me through it one more time, Ted requested, needing to be certain every detail was perfect. Dawn pulled up a timeline on her main screen. At 9 a.m. tomorrow, you leave for your business trip to Spain. At 10 a.m., you actually board a different flight under one of your new identities. By noon, the property sales will close automatically. At 1 p.m., the first round of fund transfers begins. Meanwhile, Darren continued, Madeline and the twins will be busy packing for their supposed summer trip to Barcelona. They won't notice anything until it's too late. Kimberly has her instructions, Carol added. She'll execute the final phase of document distribution once I give the signal. SEC, FBI, major news outlets. They'll all receive the evidence simultaneously. Ted stood, walking to the window. Somewhere across the city, his family. No, not his family anymore, was probably having dinner, making plans for a future that would never come. One last thing, Dawn said, her tone serious. Once this starts, there's no going back. No contact with anyone from your old life, no matter what. Are you absolutely sure about this? Ted thought about the twins calling Phil Papa, about Madeline's years of lies, about the planned betrayal that would have left him penniless and alone. I'm sure, he said quietly. They made their choice a long time ago. Now I'm making mine. The morning of Ted's departure dawned bright and clear. He stood in his bedroom, adjusting his tie one last time, playing the role of businessman preparing for an important trip. Do you have everything you need? Madeline asked, helping him with his cufflinks. The ones she'd given him for their 10th anniversary, before the lies had consumed everything. All set, Ted replied, allowing her to fuss over his appearance. Let her think he was still the same trusting fool. The car will be here in 20 minutes. I've been thinking, she said, smoothing his lapels. Perhaps the twins and I could join you in Spain sooner rather than later. They're so excited about spending summer in Barcelona. I bet they are, Ted thought, remembering the overheard conversation about Phil's house in Europe. Out loud, he said, let's see how the first few weeks go. I want to make sure everything's properly set up. Of course, darling. She kissed his cheek, and Ted marveled at her ability to maintain the act. I'll have the twins come say goodbye before you leave. Lance and Jeannie appeared as Ted was checking his briefcase one last time. They performed their expected roles perfectly, the dutiful children saying goodbye to their father. Bring us something from Spain, Dad, Jeannie said, hugging him quickly. Yeah, and take lots of pictures, Lance added, barely looking up from his phone. Ted hugged them both, wondering if they could feel how stiff and formal the embrace was. These children who had never been his, who had laughed at his ignorance behind his back. Be good for your mother, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The car arrived right on schedule, not his usual driver, but one arranged by Dawn. Ted kissed Madeline goodbye one last time, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of his life. As the car pulled away, he saw Madeline already on her phone, probably calling Phil with updates. The twins had already disappeared back inside, uninterested in watching their supposed father leave. The car didn't head to Logan International as expected. Instead, it took a series of carefully planned detours, eventually arriving at a private airfield where a different plane waited. Ted Kinney boarded a flight to Madrid. Michael Chun boarded a flight to Bangkok. Back in Boston, Madeline was already helping the twins pack for their summer in Barcelona. She hummed happily as she sorted through her jewelry, deciding what to take, unaware that her carefully planned future was dissolving with each passing hour. In her office at Kinney Construction, Kimberly sat at her computer, waiting for Carol's signal. Multiple emails were drafted, each containing carefully selected documents and evidence. The recipients included the SEC, FBI, and major news outlets. Her finger hovered over the send button, ready to execute the final phase of Ted's plan. 1 month later, Madeline Kinney's morning routine was interrupted by a loud pounding on the front door. She opened it to find federal agents with search warrants, and her world began to crumble. The morning paper lay on her designer coffee table, its headline screaming in bold type. Construction magnate's empire reveals massive fraud scheme. Below it, smaller headlines added to the devastation. Art dealer's money laundering operation exposed and corporate espionage plot uncovered. Lance stormed into the living room, waving his phone. "Mom, my tuition payment bounced. The school says I can't come back next semester." Before Madeline could respond, Jeannie rushed in from the garden. "My writing instructor just called. All my competition entries have been canceled. She says our checks were rejected." Madeline's own phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Their assets were frozen. The houses, all of them, had been sold weeks ago. The company had been transferred to employee ownership. "This is impossible," she whispered, trying to access their accounts. Every password had been changed, every trust fund dissolved. Phil wasn't answering his phone. His art gallery was closed, a notice of federal investigation posted on the door. His house in Barcelona, the one they'd planned to escape to, had been seized by European authorities. The twins sat shell-shocked on the designer couch that probably wouldn't be theirs much longer. Their dreams of European luxury had evaporated like morning mist. No more private school, no more equestrian competitions, no more pretending to be part of Boston's elite. "How could he do this to us?" Lance demanded, his arrogance crumbling in the face of reality. "Do this to us?" Jeannie's laugh was hysterical. "We're the ones who betrayed him. We're the ones who—" She trailed off as federal agents began cataloging the home's contents. Madeline sank into her favorite armchair, the same one where she'd sat plotting with Phil all those years. The newspaper articles painted a damning picture: decades of fraud, money laundering through fake art sales, corporate espionage, planned hostile takeover. Every secret exposed, every lie revealed. Meanwhile, on a sunny beach in Thailand, Ted, now living as Michael Chen, sipped a cocktail and read the news on his tablet. His old life had burned to ashes, but from them, he'd built something new: freedom. His phone, a secure line known only to Carol, buzzed with a message. He opened it to find a series of news articles: Boston socialite and international art dealer indicted for fraud, and DNA scandal rocks private school as paternity questions emerge. Attached was a photo taken by one of Carol's contacts, Madeline being led into the federal building for questioning, her designer clothes and perfect makeup unable to hide her devastation. Behind her, Phil was being escorted in handcuffs, his sophisticated facade shattered. The twins, their parentage now public knowledge, faced their own crisis. Their friends had turned on them, their social media accounts flooded with mockery and disdain. The very society circles they'd hoped to dominate now shunned them completely. Ted closed his tablet and walked along the shore, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The warm sand between his toes felt nothing like the manicured lawns of his Boston estate. The sound of waves replaced the noise of corporate boardrooms. A message from Dawn confirmed that his new identities remained secure, his cryptocurrency fortune untraceable. She'd kept her word. He'd vanished completely, leaving behind a perfectly executed plan that dismantled the lies his life had been built on. Carol's final update was brief. "It's done? They'll never recover from this." Ted typed back a simple response. "Good." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and continued his walk along the beach. Sometimes, the best revenge wasn't about violence or confrontation. Sometimes, it was simply about living well and letting karma handle the rest. The sun dipped below the horizon, taking with it the last remnants of Ted Kinney's old life. Tomorrow would bring a new day, a new identity, a new beginning. But for now, he simply walked along the shore, finally at peace with the knowledge that justice, in its own way, had been served. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, was a far cry from the luxury Madeline Kinney had once known. Her designer clothes had been replaced by prison orange, her spa treatments by strictly scheduled yard time. After 5 years, she still hadn't adjusted to the harsh fluorescent lighting that made her premature wrinkles more pronounced. "Visitor for you, Kinney," the guard announced, leading her to the visiting area. Jeannie sat at one of the metal tables, looking nothing like the privileged teenager she'd been. At 21, she wore simple clothes from a discount store, her once perfectly maintained hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No more equestrian competitions or designer outfits. She worked as a receptionist at a local veterinary clinic, attending community college at night. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly, no longer the entitled child who had mocked the man she'd called father. "Darling." Madeline reached for her daughter's hands, but Jeannie kept them in her lap. "How's your brother?" "Still working construction in Nevada," Jeannie replied. "Entry-level stuff. Ironic, isn't it? He finally ended up in the family business, just not the way we planned." Lance had taken the fall harder than his sister. His dreams of attending an elite university had evaporated with their trust funds. The boy who once sneered at manual labor now spent his days doing exactly that, learning the trade from the ground up, just as Ted once had. And Madeline hesitated. "Your father? Which one?" Jeannie's laugh was bitter. "Ted? Nobody's heard from him in 5 years. He's gone. Probably living his best life somewhere while we deal with this mess." "Or do you mean Phil? Still got 12 years left in federal prison, last I heard. The international money laundering charges really did him in." Phil Melendez, once the sophisticated art dealer from Barcelona, now resided in a maximum security facility. His international art fraud scheme had attracted attention from multiple governments. The man who had plotted to steal another's fortune had lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, and even his family. "Have you spoken to Carol lately?" Madeline asked, trying to change the subject. "Why would he speak to me? He's busy running the company, successfully, I might add. They just opened their 5th international office." Jeannie's expression hardened. The employees' trust was the best thing that could have happened to them. "The stock value has tripled." Kimberly, or had been promoted to Chief Operations Officer, her loyalty and integrity rewarded. She'd implemented new transparency policies that made the company stronger than ever. The boardroom where Madeline had once plotted corporate espionage now hosted employee profit-sharing meetings. "I saw the Hendersons at the grocery store last week," Jeannie continued. "Remember them? They used to be at all your charity events." Mrs. Henderson turned down the aisle rather than face me. "Guess that's still happening after 5 years." Boston's elite social circles, which had once been Madeline's playground, now shunned any connection to the scandal. The charity boards she'd sat on, the social clubs she'd dominated, all had erased her name from their records. The society pages now tracked the rise of younger, more honest socialites. "Your trust fund," Madeline began, "was transferred to scholarship programs for employees' children." Jeannie cut her off. "I know. 3 kids are attending college now because of what used to be my horse-showing money. Good for them." The prestigious private school that Lance and Jeannie had attended now used their case in ethics seminars. Their former classmates had gone on to elite universities while they struggled to rebuild their lives from scratch. Meanwhile, across the world, a successful entrepreneur named Michael Chun had built a respectable consulting business in Thailand. His expertise helped small construction companies grow sustainably, his reputation for integrity drawing clients from across Southeast Asia. Few knew that Michael Chun had once been Ted Kinney, and those who did kept his secret. Carol visited occasionally on business trips, bringing news of Boston that he knew Ted still wanted to hear, despite everything. They never discussed the family that had betrayed him, focusing instead on the company's success and the positive changes their actions had brought about. Ted had found peace in his new life. His beachfront home was smaller than his Boston mansion, but filled with genuine friendships and honest relationships. He'd even started dating again, a local businesswoman who appreciated him for who he was, not what he owned. Dawn Harper had done her job well. Despite extensive investigations, no one had ever tracked down Ted Kinney or his fortune. The cryptocurrency wallets she'd established remained secure, their contents funding charitable works through untraceable donations. Ted had found that helping others anonymously brought more satisfaction than all his previous displays of wealth. Darren Brown still worked as a private investigator in Boston, his role in Ted's disappearance known to very few. He'd gained a reputation for exposing corporate fraud, his experience with the Kinney case making him particularly effective. Occasionally, he'd receive an anonymous tip that helped crack a case. The emails untraceable, but the writing style oddly familiar. Back in the prison visiting room, Madeline watched her daughter stand to leave. "Will you come again next month?" "I don't know, Mom. Between work and school. We'll see." Jeannie paused. "Lance asked me to tell you. He's using Dad's name now." "Ted's name?" "Said it's a reminder to be a better person." After Jeannie left, Madeline returned to her cell, past the common room where a television played the local news. A story about Kinney Construction's latest charitable initiative caught her attention, a program providing construction training to underprivileged youth. She watched Carol Lancaster present the project, standing confidently where she had once expected Phil to stand. That night, in her narrow prison bed, Madeline dreamed of her old life, the parties, the plotting, the perfect lies. She woke to the reality of concrete walls and strict schedules, another day of consequences stretching before her. On the other side of the world, Ted sat in his beach house office, reviewing reports from his consulting business. A framed photo on his desk showed him with a group of local builders whose businesses he'd helped develop. Their success had become his redemption, their gratitude washing away the bitterness of his past. His phone buzzed, a message from Carol. "Just met your namesake. Lance is doing well in Nevada, working hard, learning the trade. He asks about you sometimes, through channels. Should I tell him anything?" Ted stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Tell him hard work and honesty build stronger foundations than quick schemes and lies. He'll understand eventually." The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in colors no artist, certainly not Phil, could capture. Ted stepped onto his balcony, breathing in the salt air. His tablet showed news from Boston, another charity initiative from his old company, another success story from the employees' trust, another small piece of good growing from the ashes of betrayal. 5 years had changed everything, and nothing. The perfect lie had been exposed, its architects punished, its victims either redeemed or condemned by their own choices. Ted had lost a false family but gained a true purpose. His revenge had been complete, but his victory lay not in their downfall but in his own resurrection. As darkness settled over the beach, Ted raised a glass to the horizon. "To karma," he whispered, "the great equalizer." In prison cells and construction sites, in veterinary clinics and corner offices, in Boston's society gatherings and Thailand's business meetings, the ripples of one man's response to betrayal continued to spread. Some called it revenge, others called it justice, but Ted knew the truth. Sometimes the best revenge was simply living well and letting time reveal the consequences of each person's choices. The perfect lie had crumbled, but from its ruins, various truths had emerged. Some bitter, some sweet, all transformative. In the end, everyone had received exactly what they had earned. No more, no less. And perhaps that was the greatest justice of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.